Yeah, probably. Should I?
All right. Welcome to the very first episode of Offside Opinions podcast. I'm Ashray Niotia.
And I'm Levi Nahr.
And our goal for this podcast is to really just be your one-stop shop for all your NFL content for the week. So what the schedule is going to look like, is it's going to run for 30 minutes. And we'll have a couple different sections. The first of which is going to be the weekly recap of all of last week's games. All right, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive into that.
I'll be starting with the top questions for each team that lost in this week's games in chronological order. First off, from the Thursday night game with the Bengals. They played great. Jamar Chase went off, as is obvious from having almost 70 fantasy points. Joe Burrow had a fantastic game too. I don't think there's a whole lot they could do different. Honestly, the only thing I can come up with that they need to do different is come up with a better situation for their run game, because it is just not clicking right now. And I think if they'd had that extra option for going for that 2-point conversion, they might have won. Starting off with the Sunday games, the Giants. At this point, is it a decision they could consider to just drop Daniel Jones and tank the season, draft a new quarterback, rebuild from there? Nothing's clicking in their offense right now. So I think that might be the best decision. For the Bears losing to the Patriots so badly, do they just need to build from there? At this point, what they need to do? Should they? Nothing's clicking in their offense right now. Tank the season. So I think maybe that give them a chance in the future, or did he just have a bad game and they should keep giving him more chances every week? With the Colts losing, there's not a whole lot they can do at this point. Anthony Richardson is looking like a bust, and Joe Flacco is not really playing good enough to get their team back on track. So, I don't know that there's much else they can do, but should they bench Joe Flacco? That's definitely a question to consider, because he is not playing well at all. For the Jaguars, obviously I'm happy they lost to the Vikings, so nothing to complain about there, but there's not a whole lot they can do while Trevor Lawrence is out, because their offense is also missing multiple other key players, including Christian Kirk, and just players that they can't play well without. But honestly, they're not helping themselves out by not targeting Brian Thomas at all. They totally should have targeted him more. He's one of the best remaining players in their offenses, and he had almost no presence in that game with 2 catches. So, for the Broncos, who lost a real close game to the Chiefs, I'm not really sure that there's a whole lot they could have done different in that game. I think the Chiefs just got lucky with a good block to win the game. By all means, the Broncos should have won that game, but the only question that comes out of that matchup is can Bo Nix keep it up and keep the season strong? Maybe make the playoffs. I doubt that's realistic, being in the same division as the Chiefs, but it's always a possibility if they can keep playing like they did against the Chiefs. For the Falcons, I mean, they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I don't know that. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think the main issue there was that they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I don't know that. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think
he's an issue.
The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I don't know that. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think
he's an issue.
The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I don't know that. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. I mean, the question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. The question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. The question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. The question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. The main issue they just did not have a good game. I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a problem, at least for the moment. The question I have here is whether they should consider benching him and give Michael Penix a try, but I don't know that would solve anything. I think he's an issue. Their run game is looking really strong. I mean, really their entire offense is looking really strong, and their defense did great getting 5 interceptions on Jared Goff. But I don't know. They need to learn how to finish the game a little bit better and probably run the ball more than they did. And lastly, with the Rams last night losing to the Dolphins. I mean, Matthew Stafford just did not play well at all. He's had okay season, but he's had a lot of games like this one where he's just been unable to get the pass game on track. And I think the biggest question that leaves us with is he a viable quarterback going forward? Is he going to be their quarterback for the next couple of years, or do they need to try and draft one in this year's draft? Because he's definitely showing his age at this point, and his consistency is just not there at the moment. So that wraps up the top questions for each team that lost in this week. And, yeah.
All right, so now for each team that won this week, where do they go from here? So for the Ravens, well, I think they got a little lucked out with some blown calls, but
Definitely,
yeah.
Especially in that 2-point conversion.
But yeah, we'll still give the Ravens a W. W's a W after all.
I mean, they had a slow start. I don't know. They need to do something with Derrick Henry because that run game is not looking very strong.
So for the Carolina Panthers, sure it helped that Daniel Jones played pretty badly, but also a sign of good relief for them. They're starting to win some games under new head coach Dave Canales. Of course, it's a little too much, a little too late, but they can maybe get a second, third draft pick for hopefully drafting some new good players in the draft, if of course the draft helps them out. For the New England Patriots, well, it was a good win. Drake May's starting to look really good. They're now giving him more reps. For the Bears, like Levi said, they're not good at all.
Is Drake May a better rookie quarterback than Caleb Williams? That's the question it leaves me with, because Caleb Williams is not looking great.
So yeah, I really don't have any words to express the Bears. The Bills, they continue to look like the best team in that division. I think they're just going to run away with it. There's not really anything that they're playing too badly.
One of the best in the AFC.
The Vikings, it was a pitiful game to watch.
Ugly win.
But I think the biggest question for them is, can Sam Darnold be consistent along with the defense? If that happens, they might just be a force to be reckoned with in the NFC.
Protect the ball better. He's getting too confident throwing those deep balls.
The Chiefs. The good old Chiefs. The problem with the Chiefs is every time you think they're going to lose, they win. And every time you don't think they're going to win, they still end up winning. So I really think that they have something going on with enchantresses, enchantments,
maybe
Severus Snapes of the world. They're the NFL's definition of right now of him. You cannot beat them, it seems like, and their strength of schedule just gets easier. Can Patrick Mahomes play better?
I don't think the only team that can beat them at this point is the Bills for the rest of the season. I think they definitely have a 1 seed secured.
The Saints. Getting blessed by the Pope really works, huh? I guess with the Saints, the biggest question is, can Derek Carr continue to produce as much as he's producing? Because when he starts to produce a lot, they start to win games, and it's pretty fun to watch him. At the first 2 weeks of the season, they played really well, and they scored a ton of points. It was fun to watch their games, and then they kind of just faded out from there. So I really think the really big question for them is, can they keep it up? The 49ers. Is their team healthy enough to continue to win? I think that says it all for their season. If they were a healthy team, they'd be the best team in the NFC, and the Lions would be the second best team in the NFC.
Yeah, if they can get Christian McCaffrey back to full health, I think they can be a top NFC West team.
The Steelers. Mike Tomlin doing it again with maybe one of the better teams he's coached in the past few years. Russell Wilson, can he continue to look as good as he's looked? And I think if that holds true, then they're going to be a pretty deep playoff contender. The Chargers. Jim Harbaugh really knows how to rejuvenate a team from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after what Staley did with that team, it really looks like the Chargers have come back and are really wanting to try to make a run into the playoffs. And I think so far the plans have been going pretty well. the Arizona Cardinals. Well.
What a win.
The surprise of the season. I don't think anybody thought that the Cardinals would be this good. I, as a Rams fan, definitely didn't think this. But right now I have to say that they're looking like the best team in that division. But really, if they keep this Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray connection up, then I feel like they will make a very, very formidable team to play against in the playoffs. If they don't keep that up or if injuries derail them, then I have a high feeling that they're just going to fade out like they did with their 4 losses earlier on in the season.
And they managed to hold the Jets to 6 points, but I think a big question too is their defense going to be able to keep that up, especially in the playoffs?
The Eagles, of course, playing a team like the Cowboys isn't going to make them seem all that good. But really, I think, can they get Saquon, A.J. Brown, the stars on that offense more involved? Their defense, I feel like, has been playing well pretty much for the past few weeks. But the more and more they get their stars involved, I think the more and more they'll start to make a better team overall.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley did not do much in that game.
The Detroit Lions. For those of you, for all of you who don't know this, I am not a big Jared Goff fan. I will clear that right now, and for him to throw 5 picks was very, very nice. I loved that.
That was fun to watch.
But, on the other hand, I think the biggest question for them is, will they be able to limit the turnovers? If the turnovers don't kill them, then I think that they'll probably have a good chance of making it to the Super Bowl. And if they make it to the Super Bowl, I still think the Chiefs are going to beat them if they make it, but it'll be fun to watch them in the Super Bowl. It'll be a high-scoring game, I think. Miami. It wasn't a good game.
For either side.
Devon Achane didn't really do anything. Tyreek Hill had a touchdown catch. The Rams' defense looked like not too good, but I think the biggest question for the Dolphins is get Tyreek Hill, get Devon Achane. Again, similar to the Eagles. Get the stars involved and see what happens. Because we saw last year what happened when they got the stars involved. They scored 70 on the Broncos. They put points upon points upon points on all these other teams. But really, it was because they had their stars involved. So I really want to see what happens when the stars are involved. So that's our takes for the biggest questions of each and every team after week 10. Now we'll go into some fantasy bust, start, sits, our takes on that.
We have the top busts of the past week organized by each position and between quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. I mean, there was a lot of candidates for this bust, but I think the biggest bust for the quarterback position was Jaden Daniels with 8.58 points. I didn't expect him to be getting 30 points like he's been getting against the Steelers defense, but I definitely expected him to perform better than that. Obviously, Matthew Stafford was a big bust, but I think Jaden Daniels was one of the bigger busts of the week as well. Probably Jared Goff, too. For the top running back bust, I don't think there's a whole lot of controversy about the fact that this one goes to Saquon Barkley, 8.8 points. I mean, sure, the Cowboys' D-line is pretty good, but he should have totally been a lot more involved in their offense in this game than he was. I think I speak for most fantasy managers at this point when I said that he was an easy start at the running back position, and he just did not produce in that game. I had a tough time deciding on this one for the wide receiver position because there were some big ones. Sadly, Justin Jefferson did not play great, but I gave this one to Deontay Johnson because he only got 1.6 points, and if I had him on any of my fantasy teams, I totally would have started him and expected him to do well, him being on the Ravens now. But yeah, 1.6 points is not looking good enough. For the tight end, I mean, Kyle Pitts didn't play great, but I gave this one to Dalton Kincaid because, one, he's on my fantasy team, and it really, really hurt to see him only get 4.4 points. But I mean, especially just for the entire season, he's been a big bust. Everyone expected him to be really good with just the lack of talented wide receivers the Bills offense has. I mean, even with them getting Amari Cooper in a trade with the Browns, I totally think that he should still be getting more production than he has been, especially when the Bills are playing as well as they are. I totally expected Dalton Kincaid to play well this week, and he just did not. So those are the top offensive busts of the week, fantasy-wise, in Week 10.
So now for our start-sit advices. So I think the one start that everybody should have, really, even though Saquon had a bad week, is still Saquon. I mean, the Eagles have shown that when they use him, he's very good. Like, the lows are low, but the floor is not too low to the point where you can't trust him anymore. And
they're playing the Commanders. The Commanders just do not have a strong enough defense to hold back Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, especially after the Commanders got rid of Chase Young.
Yep.
It doesn't really help that they're not going to be, one of the best games teams in the NFL. Now, another start that I think is pretty like you want to start this guy is going to be Jaden Daniels against the Eagles defense. Jaden Daniels, again, he had a bad week. Everybody has bad weeks. But still, against the Eagles defense, whose secondary has looked pretty mid at times.
Yeah, off and on.
He can probably eat with Terry McLaurin. Pretty much, like, we've seen the arm. Like, I think that says it all. The Hail Mary against the Bears should say it all.
I mean, his legs get so much fantasy points.
A lot of the Lions players this week, because they play the Jaguars. I think enough said with that. The Packers and Bears, I mean, you might get away with starting DeAndre Swift, but he had a really bad week this week. He's shown that the highs are high, the lows are low, and if you really, really need a streaming option, then he might be an option, but I would say steer clear of Bears players and Packers players for just maybe this week.
I mean, maybe start Josh Jacobs, maybe, if you're desperate and need a flex position, but...
The Dolphins hope that Devon Achane does well. I think that's clear.
I wouldn't rely on any of the receivers at this point.
The Rams, I think, is pretty straightforward. Puka, your big three. Puka, Kyren, and Cooper Kupp should say it all. And then I think the biggest start is going to be Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Both of those guys always show up to play against either of the opposing teams, especially this week being Chiefs-Bills.
Always a high-scoring match.
So I really think that those guys will show up to play and play very, very well.
I think a big sit for the week is probably going to be Derrick Henry, which is tough for me to say because he's definitely my best running back on one of my teams. But, I mean, the Steelers' defense has been playing too well to justify starting Derrick Henry this week.
And then the biggest sit for the week, apart from Derrick Henry, is going to be CeeDee Lamb against the Texans. The Texans don't have that good of a secondary, but they play at the Cowboy Stadium, and if it's even slightly bright outside, then nobody's going to be able to catch a ball with how that stadium's designed.
Especially with the backup QB playing.
So, yeah. Now to some takes. So, with the Jets, you said, of course, what was wrong earlier. I wanted to add a little bit onto that, and you can either agree or disagree with me. The New York Jets deviated from a plan that was going to work for them. They were drafting young players. They drafted Zach Wilson. That was a bust. That's fine. But then after that, they went out. They got Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, all of these young, explosive players. And then they topped that off with trading for Aaron Rodgers. And that really hasn't panned out for them. Then they traded for Devontae Adams. They just keep trying to dig a hole and then deviate from a plan which would have worked. Really, this year, I think what they should do is they should try to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. They should try to keep Devontae Adams. And they should just try to tank and get a young, explosive QB. Cam Ward might go for the draft. Try to get him. I'm not sure who else would want to go for the draft. I mean, I know Carson Beck from Georgia might, but Carson Beck hasn't looked that consistent yet.
Yeah.
And so really, I think for the Jets, that's what's going to be the best option.
Yeah, I agree with keeping I agree with keeping Devontae. I think he hasn't been playing great in New York, but I think that's mostly on Aaron Rodgers. I don't really know that. I think he definitely still has a few good years left in his career.
So the next take is about the Rams, actually, my team. Is Jared Verse a good replacement of Aaron Donald?
Yeah, I think he's been. I mean, their whole D-line's been playing great. I don't know that you can really say replacement of Aaron Donald because those are really big shoes to fill. But I think he's been good enough. I mean, it's hard to be good enough to fill that position with Aaron Donald leaving it. But I think he's been good enough. Yeah, good enough pick.
So yeah, and also Jared Verse has generated the most amount of QB pressure, I think, from any rookie D lineman this season. So I think that if he just keeps playing like that, then he will become very, very good. Not only at his position, but like just in general as a defensive player, kind of like Aaron Donald was. The next thing or take is going to be actually about the Vikings. Is their defense good enough to try and play well with these really, really good NFC teams like the Lions or the Commanders or the Eagles?
I think for the rest of the regular season, I mean, they have a pretty easy schedule apart from the Lions and maybe the Packers, but I think they'll definitely play well for the rest of the regular season. But yeah, I think definitely a big question is can they keep it up in the playoffs, because Stephon Gilmore's been super off and on, and he's a big part of our secondary at this point. So I think our D-line can keep playing well. We've shown a lot of strength in that area, but I don't know if our secondary is going to be enough for the playoffs.
And I agree with Eli fully. Andrew Van Ginkel's looked very good. I think the only problem with their defense has been so far is just the inconsistencies. The highs are great, but again, the lows are too low. I really think that if they are able to play even consistently for 2 playoff games in a row, they'll still be in a really good position. The last take for tonight, before we wrap up, is going to be about the San Francisco 49ers.
I mean, I think definitely a big question, like we mentioned in the questions for each team that won. I mean, can Christian McCaffrey bounce back? But I think he can. He played really, really well against the Buccaneers, and I mean, honestly, I think the only other issue other than whether or not Christian McCaffrey can come back is if Jake Moody can bounce back, because that was not a good game field goal wise, and as being a team that struggled a lot to capitalize on drives in the red zone, they need a good kicker, and Jake Moody has not been that so far this year. So
yeah, I agree with Levi completely here, and also I want to add in that their defense has looked pretty good. Of course, Nick Bosa got fined for wearing the Donald Trump hat, but I think that's self-explanatory there.
Yeah.
But really, I think the biggest thing about the 49ers is can Brock Purdy actually play, like he's been playing pretty well recently. Can he continue this level of play and still find his receivers? That is basically just George Kittle and Juwan Jennings for right now, because Ayuk is on IR and Deebo Samuel, I don't think, played too well last game, if he played at all.
Yeah, and I don't know that they're going to be making Deebo a much bigger part of their offense than he has been, because he's just not been a good teammate so far this season. So.
And yeah, also, Deebo did play last game. I remember that now. Deebo, he had a little altercation with Jake Moody in the sideline.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, I just wanted to spell that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 49ers can make a push for the playoffs at the very least, but the only really formidable opponent in their way will be the Cardinals, I think, for right now, because the Rams haven't looked good as of lately, that is this week.
At least inconsistent, yeah.
Yeah, we beat the Vikings, we beat the Seahawks, and then we lost this very winnable game, actually. And I think the biggest thing for the Rams, if they want to compete in this with the not with the Seahawks, but with the 49ers and with the Cardinals, is just, again, staying consistent. I think that's been a constant theme throughout the NFL this season. It's just inconsistency upon inconsistency. But on that note, our 30 minutes are up. So
That's
thank you to
fast.
everybody who joined in for the very first episode of our podcast. It means a lot to us. Thank you very much, and we will see you guys next week.